There is no such thing as freedom of choice unless there is freedom to refuse. Nothing is more surprising than the easiness with which the many are governed by the few. Beauty in things exists in the mind which contemplates them. It is seldom that liberty of any kind is lost all at once. Slavery has so frightful an aspect to men accustomed to freedom that it must steal upon them by degrees, and must disguise itself in 1,000 shapes, in order to be received. A wise man proportions his belief to the evidence. When men are most sure and arrogant, they are commonly most mistaken, giving views to passion without that proper deliberation which alone can secure them from the grossest absurdities. If God is omnipotent, omniscient, and wholly good, whence evil? If God wills to prevent evil but cannot, then he is not omnipotent. If he can prevent evil but does not, then he is not good. In either case, he is not God. Nothing appears more surprising to those who consider human affairs with a philosophical eye than the easiness with which the many are governed by the few, and the implicit submission with which men resign their own sentiments and passions to those of their rulers. The life of man is of no greater importance to the universe than that of an oyster. Be a philosopher, but amid all your philosophy be still a man. Eloquence at its highest pitch leaves little room for reason or reflection, but addresses itself entirely to the desires and affections, captivating the willing hearers and subduing their understanding. All knowledge degenerates into probability. A propensity to hope and joy is real riches, one to fear and sorrow real poverty. Muhammad praises treachery, inhumanity, cruelty, revenge, and bigotry that are utterly incompatible with civilized society. It is an absurdity to believe that the deity has human passions, and one of the lowest of human passions, a restless appetite for applause. When I hear that a man is religious, I conclude he is a rascal. In all ages of the world, priests have been enemies of liberty. No amount of observations of white swans can allow the inference that all swans are white. But the observation of a single black swan is sufficient to refute that conclusion. No quality of human nature is more remarkable, both in itself and in its consequences, than that propensity we have to sympathize with others, and to receive by communication their inclinations and sentiments, however different from, or even contrary to our own. To hate, to love, to think, to feel, to see, all this is nothing but to perceive. The mind is a kind of theater where several perceptions successively make their appearance, pass, repass, glide away, and mingle in an infinite variety of postures and situations. Reading and sauntering and lounging and dosing, which I call thinking, is my supreme happiness. He is happy whom circumstances suit his temper, but he is more excellent who suits his temper to any circumstance. All power, even the most despotic, rests ultimately on opinion. When men are most sure and arrogant, they are commonly most mistaken. Morals excite passions and produce or prevent actions. Reason of itself is utterly impotent in this particular. The rules of morality, therefore, are not conclusions of our reason. The heart of man is made to reconcile the most glaring contradictions. It is not reason which is the guide of life, but custom. The Crusades, the most signal and most durable monument of human folly that has yet appeared in any age or nation, A man acquainted with history may in some respect be said to have lived from the beginning of the world, and to have been making continual additions to his stock of knowledge in every century. It's when we start working together that the real healing takes place. It's when we start spilling our sweat and not our blood. Habit may lead us to belief and expectation, but not to the knowledge, and still less to the understanding of lawful relations. The difference between a man who is led by opinion or emotion and one who is led by the former, whether he will or not, performs things of which he is entirely ignorant. The latter is subordinate to no one, and only does those things which he knows to be of primary importance in his life, and which on that account he desires the most. And therefore I call the former a slave, but the latter free. Human happiness seems to consist in three ingredients: action, pleasure, and indolence. Custom is the great guide to human life. A little philosophy makes a man an atheist. A great deal converts him to religion. Heaven and hell suppose two distinct species of men, the good and the bad. But the greatest part of mankind float betwixt vice and virtue. Nothing indeed can be a stronger presumption of falsehood than the approbation of the multitude. Eloquence, when in its highest pitch, leaves little room for reason or reflection. Belief is nothing but a more vivid, lively, forcible, firm, steady conception of an object than what the imagination alone is ever able to attain. Examine the religious principles which have, in fact, prevailed in the world. You will scarcely be persuaded that they are other than sick men's dreams. Of all the animals with which this globe is peopled, there is none towards whom nature seems, at first sight, to have exercised more cruelty than towards man, in the numberless wants and necessities with which she has loaded him, and in the slender means which she affords to the relieving these necessities. A wise man's kingdom is his own breast, or, if he ever looks farther, it will only be to the judgment of a select few, who are free from prejudices and capable of examining his work. Nothing, indeed, can be a stronger presumption of falsehood than the approbation of the multitude. And Phocion, you know, always suspected himself of some blunder when he was attended with the applauses of the populace. The corruption of the best things gives rise to the worst. Any pride or haughtiness is displeasing to us merely because it shocks our own pride, and leads us by sympathy into comparison, which causes the disagreeable passion of humility. Everything in the world is purchased by labor. That the sun will not rise tomorrow is no less intelligible a proposition, and implies no more contradiction than the affirmation that it will rise. The Christian religion not only was at first attended with miracles, but even at this day cannot be believed by any reasonable person without one. Moving from an objective statement of fact to a subjective statement of value does not work, because it leaves open questions that have not been answered.